Sometimes I really don't see the point. It's what a young man recently said to me. And he wasn't clinically depressed, not like that. No, he was awake. He was looking hard at the world around him, and he wondered, sometimes, what's the point? Not sure I can blame him. He pointed to a number of things that would drive you in that direction. He particularly is concerned about the possibility of a pandemic erupting and decimating human society. Could happen, and there's not much we could do about it. Others are concerned about economics and how it's unfolding. Are we moving towards a world without work? I have a friend who's writing a novel trying to explore the idea of what happens to a society, to a community, when robots take over a lot of the jobs. What are we going to do in a world where there is no work? Then, of course, everybody can point to the big one, environmental catastrophe. I mean, fires are erupting in California, stronger storms, and that's just the beginning of it. As sea levels rise, millions, even billions of people will be displaced. That's going to cause such social upheaval that wars have got to come out of it. And so you look at that, if you're awake, you carry a lot of anxiety and worry, and from time to time you say, sometimes I wonder, what's the point? I get it. But my real concern is that young people are facing this kind of looming catastrophe or web of catastrophes without any sense of, I guess I'll call it a framework or a grounding of purpose and meaning to their life. It's not their fault. They're just operating without that because the one that used to be there has been deconstructed. Usually it's religion that provides that kind of a framework, that grounding, that sense of direction and purpose, a way to allow ourselves to feel as though we're fitting into something greater than ourselves that makes sense and is important. It's usually religion that does that, but the reality is religion has faltered. In the West, that's largely been the Christian religion, the church, and the church has failed you miserably. I'm talking to young people now because it's important to me that you begin to hear what's missing and maybe start to seek to replace it. Because what's happening inside is hard to fathom when you're facing the kind of catastrophes that are very real and coming soon enough. The church has failed because it just had to hang on to that supernatural God, the one that kind of fidgets and fudges with things, interferes in some people's lives and makes them better, but doesn't interfere in other people's lives. This God that's kind of up there, they wouldn't let go of it. And because they wouldn't let go of it, they offered something that made no sense. It's been deconstructed and people have walked away. I mean, it used to make sense. God created the world in 6 calendar days and rested on the 7th. Created humankind as a reflection of God's own creative power, God's own creative impulse. Okay? And so you could see yourself as somebody who was living a life as a steward of the creation around you. You could see yourself as someone who was connected to this word power, this creative force that was running the universe. You were responsible to it, really. You read another story about Adam and Eve, and you discover that you're really created for intimacy with the divine and intimacy with one another, and that those things are connected. That we don't quite live up to that vision of what's happening in the world. We don't live into that intimacy. We are fallen, so to speak. And so life is about working towards redemption, working towards a place where we are a community of people who love God and love one another, where that connection to the divine power of love unfolds within us and reaches out to the world around us. It used to make a lot of sense, But it doesn't make any sense anymore because we know perfectly well that God didn't create the world in 6 calendar days and rested on the seventh. Things started 13.82 billion years ago. We know perfectly well that there is no magic God out there above in the heavens that reaches in and fidgets and fudges with the way history goes forward. It just doesn't operate that way. That whole idea has been deconstructed, and the trouble is that it's left people, it's left you, facing catastrophes without any real sense of who you are and where you're going. What are you up to? How does your life fit into all of this? And that concerns me. Of course, in its place, a new creation story has been promoted. See if this sounds familiar. 13.82 billion years ago, there was a big bang. And since then, the universe has evolved randomly, going uphill until finally we are produced. That we are subject to physical laws, subject to the vagaries of chance. It's an entirely random process. But do you see what that means for your life? That means you're an accident. That means that anything you do is really kind of pointless and accidental. It doesn't matter. And kind of the only reason you're alive, at least the foundational reason, is to gather up enough power so that you can take care of yourself. So you can pay attention to you, who is isolated from everything else. Oh, sure, we're social animals, and so many people try and seek some meaning and connection to their family or to other people. But when we face that web of catastrophes that could unfold right in front of us, where's the ground? Where's the sense that there's anything going on other than just chance, random nothingness, and we're left isolated and alone? At least that's how I see that story moving forward in our hearts, in our society. And I'm looking at a world where people grab for whatever they can. I'm looking at a world where this idea that I'm going to be the fittest, that I'm going to be the strongest, that I'm going to be able to protect myself from catastrophe is the thing that drives people. Either that or they run from the whole thing, stay asleep as long as they can. Can you blame them, really? Because otherwise, sometimes life feels pointless. But the reality is that new story is as wrong as the six-day creation story. And I think at some level people know that, and they're waking up to that fact. That story's wrong, and a new one is starting to emerge. It's not magic. It doesn't rely on a God that interferes at all. It starts in the same place with that Big Bang 13.82 billion years ago, but it's got nothing to do with random. Oh, sure, random and chance play a role in the unfolding of evolution in the universe, right? But that's not finally what it's about. From the Big Bang to Shakespeare, evolution unfolds in steps, or jumps, as some people call them. Unfolds in steps. And each time there's a step in evolution, things move forward and they become more complex. The relationships between particles or between entities become more complex, even we could say more intimate. Right? Whatever the next step is, transcends and includes that which went before. Stress has entered the system and is driven things forward in such a way that a novel and new thing must take place, so that evolution can unfold, not in any random way, but towards greater complexity and towards new and novel intimacy and relationship. It can happen at the molecular level, of course. You know, picture a universe where there were some hydrogen atoms and some oxygen atoms, you know, and they come together and you get 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen and you get water. Right? We've transcended and included that which went before. The hydrogen and the oxygen still exist, but they're in a more complex relationship in that water molecule. And they also bring along something novel because if I'd been there and knew about charges, I might have been able to guess the two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom would come together and form a molecule. But if I'd never seen it before, never would have occurred to me to think of the idea of wet. Novelty. It's actually what brings hope in the world for me because I'm looking for a next step in evolution that's novel that I can't imagine yet. But this evolutionary impulse drives things step by step, transcending and including more complex, even intimate relationships between entities. You know, at a certain point, when evolution unfolds and we get to a place where societies and relationships develop, we recognize that that evolutionary impulse has the character of love. It is the character of care for other, reaching together to form intimate relationships. That's the nature of the creation in which we live. A woman named Jean Houston calls it jump time, each one of these steps. And I'd like to read her little piece, partly because it's fun, but also because it gives a sense of where you are and where I am in this long story that went from the Big Bang to Shakespeare in 13.82 billion years. That is a trajectory towards more creative advance, towards novelty, towards beauty, really. The first jump was the Big Bang, an explosion of light and sound so intense that whatever was before or from some other where imploded itself into a tiny charge of hydrogen and jumped into universal form. Then, some 5 billion years ago, a supernova reached jump time and with an unimaginably fierce explosion offered itself to the universe in billions of pieces. Another jump came for us when elements spun out of the explosion, coalesced into a ball that condensed into our mother, our molten planet. Many jumps of cooling, crusting, boiling, steaming, raining. Seas form, the crust roils, land masses jump and shift, break off and crawl over each other, pulverizing everything in their wake. Meteors whiz by, raising blinding dust storms, or carom into the Earth's crust, tossing pieces of it sky high. It's a setup for the biggest jump of all, life. Lightning spikes the earth, molecules break apart and recombine, jumping through change after chemical change. At the edges of the rock, in the shallow waters, the feast of life begins. Giant proteins play with RNA and DNA. Some jump to form enzymes, which hurry everything along. Nucleic acids hold the information to make the huge jump to self-replication. Molecules build on each other, combine and recombine, building ever larger structures, modeling and learning from one another. Jump! Cell walls that move and flex, letting food in and wastes out. Jump! Bacteria form, creating food for themselves. As a waste product, a deadly poison, oxygen, is released. Jump! Cope with oxygen. Jump! Grow or die. Cooperate or perish. Make agreements. Enjoy diversity. Put it to work. Jump! The mothers and fathers of all of us are born, the nucleated cell. Jump, cell mitosis. Jump, sexual reproduction. Organisms unite so the species can continue. Plants jump, sea creatures jump, land creatures, big jump. Dinosaurs, insects, flowers, birds jump. Heads up, snouts rise, eyes converge, brains grow. Jump, walking upright. Jump, vocal communication. Jump, awareness of ourselves. Jump, tool making, clothes wearing, plant gathering, seed setting, wheel turning, horse training, water channeling, plow rooting, loom spinning, food storing, star charting, tower building, metal smelting, myth telling, hieroglyphs in cuneiform, and alphabets to record all this. Jump! Bureaucracy and empire, religions and scriptures, Buddha, Confucius, Pythagoras, Christ. Jump! Book scribing, print pressing, art making, playwriting, telescopes, microscopes, spectroscopes, stethoscopes, Renaissance, revolution, resettling, migration, liberty, fraternity, equality, democracy. Jump! Vaccination, sanitation, medication, refrigeration, computers, air travel, space travel, life extending, gender choosing, species making, world links, world banks, global village, and here we are because it is jump time. It's a remarkable story when you look at it that way. Driven forward not at random, but through these forces that are calling us together in more unity and more intimacy. complexity and beauty, transcending and including, novelty, emerging at the most crucial moments of creation. That's the story we're part of. And when you consider that it's not random, that it's not pointless, what does that make you? That makes you an expression of that evolutionary impulse, of the love that is driving forward and bringing things together in perfect harmony. That makes you valuable. You're called to live out a life that is connected to that source, that is connected to that power that unfolds within you, that love that reaches out, surrounds you, and is expressed through you. That's what this creation story is about. It means your life is valuable and you are not alone. That real power is the power that joins things together in perfect harmony, that allows for ever increasing intimacy and care. This is what gives life meaning. This is the purpose we can live towards, even die for. That's the nature of creation, and it's interesting to me that it resonates with some of those other stories that we see in the religious traditions. It's important to me that it resonate with those older traditions because the experiences and the intuitions of ancient peoples were as real as yours and mine. Of course, the way they described them doesn't measure up and doesn't make sense in today's world. But they understood. They knew that there was some creative force operating in the world, that we were an expression of that, and that we long to be able to live our role in the universe, seeking love. I'll talk more about the nature of this love, but for now I'd just ask you a question. If you try that on for size, does that new story, that creation story, does that ring true for you? And if it does, how does it change the way you want to operate in the world? How does it change how you look at yourself and your value? You are an expression of the love that is the evolutionary impulse that has brought creation forward from the Big Bang to Shakespeare. Your heart is real. This life is real and has value. And in the face of a web of catastrophes, we're going to need that ground. We're going to need that connection. I want that for you.